My name is John Cornicello, and I welcome you to my series of live online interactive photo conversations. You can check out the schedule at cornicello.com/conversations for dates and times of upcoming shows, and you'll also find links to previous conversations there. Today, my guest is Lou Jones. Lou has had an eclectic career ranging from commercial to personal projects. He's worked in every format, film type, and in digital. He has a studio in Boston, Massachusetts, and photographs for businesses, large and small, magazines, and publishers. He also has long-term projects on civil wars in Central America, death row, on pregnancy, and finally on the Olympics, which we'll talk about today. So please welcome Lou Jones.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Do you want me to take over now, John?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm just enthralled by all the people that are chiming in and coming in to take a look at this. I don't know how we do this and whether it's possible, but can everybody raise their hand who has been, is, or promises to be a photographer in the future? Can everybody raise their hand who's been? So most of us, I take it, are going to be will know pretty much what I'm talking about. But John has asked me to talk about a very eclectic part to my career. As he mentioned, I do mostly advertising and commercial work for companies large and small, and have maintained a studio in Boston for years and years and years. But one of the things, an offshoot about the career, the editorial part of the career, and commercial, I will say, has been the Olympics. And I'm going to start sharing screen. He's allowed me to do that, to show some pictures. And John, let me know if you can see that.
I can. Looks good.
All right. So as everybody knows, everybody's now part of the new world in which we're using social media and websites and all kinds of methodologies to stay relevant. There you go. This is better. To stay relevant. So there's my phone number and my main website. We have a few websites, and I'll talk about that as we go along. And but several years ago, a client hired me to photograph, at that time, a long time ago, the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. All right, and it's not going forward. What is happening here? Why are we not getting? There we go.
There you go.
All right. The 1984, it was here in the United States. They only had to transport me across the United States, and it was for a proposed magazine that they were trying to get started. And I photographed my first Olympics. Now, I had always had an interest in the Olympics since I was a young person. Actually competed in an Olympic trial at one point in a very strange sport, but I was a really sort of walking encyclopedia of the Olympics. And so this was a really dream assignment, and I took it on. And this was a photograph I took in Los Angeles, equestrian. I didn't know much about equestrian at that time, but I have since learned a fairly large body of knowledge about the Olympics in general and about many of the sports. But this was equestrian. And it's a photograph that's a little different. And if anybody has questions, please put them in the thing as we go along. It was a little different. It's a little different kind of photograph, because I realized early on that I could predict and tell you, I could predict at that time and tell you exactly what was going to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine weeks before they published the actual issue during the Olympics. And I found that to be really problematic. They only published a very small segment of the kind of photography. And I said, here we have this incredible personal, individual competition, and the things that are happening are poetic. Poetry, physical poetry is going on. And so I said, I'm going to try to figure out how to photograph the Olympics differently. And I had to do the same kind of photographs that Sports Illustrated was doing at the time to satisfy my client, but I tried to add a different kind of thing. So let's see, we're still getting, why is this doing this? Why are we getting problems here? Let's see. Maybe we're going to have to stay out of, can you still see that, John?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I had to go to a different kind of screen. Anyway, 1984 was the first one. That's a long, long time ago. And I fell in love with it so much that I realized that I wanted to try to repeat it. But the Olympics only come around in those days every 4 years. So I adopted the fact that I wanted to try to cover a number of them, try to cover the full range of sports, try to cover this incredible international pageantry. So here we go. And I decided, I was born down south. I hate cold weather, even though I live in Boston. I hate cold weather, but I had to learn how to photograph for the Winter Olympics. And this was a photograph in Calgary. Actually, no, this is Albertville. This is a few Olympics later. But anyway, I did Calgary right after 4 years after the first Summer Olympics. And I thought I was going to die. It was so cold. We see the Olympics on TV in the comfort, the beer next to us, or with our family surrounding us. It becomes this international event on TV. Everybody sharing many of the sports at the same time, et cetera, et cetera. But we're all in the comfort of our homes. And the photographers, for any of you who have photographed, all know the Olympics, all know that it is brutal, brutal, brutal conditions. And the first one, I went in and I put on the long underwear and the gloves and hats and all of that, and literally thought I was going to die. But so you're seeing these kind of pictures that I'm finding the graphics, the nature of how the sport itself is so beautiful. The sports, it's doing it. Why is it doing that? This is Seoul, Korea. And one of the things that happens with the Olympics, and is very odd, is we're also, which is something I learned, is that the coverage in America, whether it be that all of the stations have had a shot at it at one time. We all think of it in terms of ABC, but all of the stations have had a shot at bidding for the Olympics and carrying it on there. But they only show, and justifiably so, they only show the sports that America, the United States, does well in, or has somebody who's a big star and is likely to win a gold medal or do well. But I decided that so my entire world of view was changing with my career that was taking me all over the world. To date, I have photographed on assignment in 60 different foreign countries. So my entire career was shifting, where clients were sending me in all kinds of different places, and I was falling in love with all kinds of other cultures. So one of the things that I became more and more eclectic and more a world citizen, I think. I know that sounds like I'm patting myself on the back, but I was really interested in what kind of sports were being done. So this is weightlifting, which we traditionally have not done too well, but we have different parts of the world. And this was I believe, Bulgarian. I'm looking at the thing on his chest. I think he was from Bulgaria, but those countries tend to do better. And I didn't know much about the weightlifting, but over the years I've photographed it, and I changed. Again, I told you that Sports Illustrated only shows 2 photographs at different alternating weeks during the Olympics. And I was really resistant to that. So one of the things is that all of the photographers line up and try to get the winner, the person that's going to win the weight, especially if it's an American. And I realized that was not sports. That was not competition. That was the end of the race. It was all done. The person was tired. The person was in celebratory mode if they were crossing the finish line. So, and it was an uninteresting picture. It wasn't very poetic, usually, not always, but usually. So I realized that the best pictures were usually at the beginning of the race, where everybody was together, where everybody was vying for superiority, where you could get photographs like in this. This is my event in college. And so I knew a lot about it. And I knew that the first 2 or 3 hurdles were really where the race was sort of almost always decided. The person has a great start, the person is able to get out of the blocks, etc. And also you see how everybody's computing, and the poetry, as I keep talking about it, is all there in the beginning.
So a question about that is, how much flexibility do you have in your location for where to shoot from?
Somebody is touching. Let me see if I can go. Is touching on one of the main difficulties of exactly that. Let me go one more, and I will try to see if I can add to that. Let me do one more. This is Barcelona, and then I will address
Sure.
that exact question, because that is one of the most important. And I'll address it here. This is Barcelona. This is in Spain, and this was where I really started to figure out the breakout things that I have repeated, the Olympics after Olympics, in that the Olympic Committee tries to do due diligence and gives pits and places for photographers to stand and be for the Olympics, trying to give them the best shot, but they're all scrummed together, all dozens of photographers, hundreds of photographers in some cases. I have a rule now. If I see a group of photographers, I go the exact opposite direction, which creates a real problem, because not always are they willing to give me that kind of access. But in this particular case, this is completely on the other end of the swimming pool, of the diving pool. And me and my assistant have got this little choreographed scam that we pull off for security in order to be able to get into places we're actually not supposed to be. And that sounds a little, but it's all about intent. I'm just trying to take, when we were wrapping up and we coming down from this. This is men's highboard diving in Barcelona. And I just noticed the graphic nature of all the shadows and the stairs and how people were going up and down. And it really is about the experience. And nobody was where we were standing, not a soul. So security didn't see us until the very end when we actually had to come out of this place. But so your question is about access. We try not to be anywhere that anybody else is. And actually, I will show you some pictures where we actually are in the mental process of figuring out how not to be getting the same picture that everybody else wants. This is the Winter Olympics. This is this was Albertville. This was Albertville. This was France. This is way back, probably 1992, the Olympics and way back. And again, they gave the photographers a place to be, to see the people coming off in the ski jump, coming off the end of the ramp and being perfectly framed. They put dozens of photographers there, and we realized that we had to do something different. So literally my assistant and I dug our way all the way up to just under the ramp, the end of the ramp. And so we were able to photograph them almost directly overhead, as you see. And so we were trying to get these kind of pictures. Now we got the pictures so that when the American jumper came over, he was perfectly sharp and everything, but we also were able to experiment with doing things that were a little bit different. This is film. Remember, you guys and ladies, you may not have ever heard of film, but there was a time in which we had to use film long before digital. And so, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but this is on film. This was scanned from a slide. I don't know why this is giving me trouble.
Not advancing.
It's not advancing, yes. And I practiced. I practiced. Okay, let's see. There you go.
There you go.
Again, this is the beginning of the 100-meter dash, which is sort of the premier, the big, you know, everything leads up to the marathon in sport, in track and field, not in the other Olympic, not in the other sports, but in the track and field, everything leads up to the who's the world's fastest human. And this was in Barcelona, and this was during one of the heats. That's also something that I have made a specialty. In the heats, you can see repetition. You can see how things are unfolding. You can see where people are doing certain things over and over again. And the heats really are, and they also are very, very, and it's turns the Olympics not into that one time, one perfect picture of somebody crumbing across the finish line. It turns into the problems that they involve. And we get very, very, very close. This is you have to be very, very careful when you're doing these kinds of pictures, because it turns out your motor drive, if you anticipate, you can actually get them, they will actually take off as soon as they hear your camera go click. And so, and then they throw you out of the stadium. But I've had that happen. So but this is Barcelona 100-meter.
But speaking of motor drives and the winter stuff here, there have been a couple of questions about batteries and about film breakage.
Oh, excellent. Okay, I will talk about that. This was Calgary. All right. It is a huge problem. Cameras don't like the temperature, of course, but they made them so. But the biggest problem, the two biggest problems shooting the Winter Olympics, shooting the Winter Olympics are, I have to train for months. I train like the athletes for at least 6 to 8 months before. So when you're fast asleep at 11, 12 o'clock at night, I'm out running in 3 foot of snow in order to acclimate for months and months and months before the Olympics, because it is so brutal. Second thing is hands. It took us years to figure out, believe it or not, you're dead in the water at the Winter Olympics if your hands get cold. So we had to figure out, it took us years to figure out how to keep hands warm. And the third thing is batteries. Exactly. And that also. So my assistants have to sign on. And what we do is we take a good dozen batteries, and the assistant puts the batteries next to their body, under their parka, in the lining of their underwear or wherever it is, so that they're keeping the batteries warm. And we just literally, as soon as you hear that, where the camera is starting to, and we talk to everybody. We talk to Sports Illustrated, AP, we talked to ABC, we talked to everybody about batteries, and they all had nothing but nonsense. We talked to Nikon, nonsense. So we had to discover that we keep the batteries warm. They work perfectly if you keep them warm, and we just exchange out. So.
And with the motor drive, do you have static issues? Or?
Not so much. Not so much when we actually, let me turn that off. No.
Okay.
We didn't have the static issues. They sort of figured that out. And once the camera is acclimated, which is another problem, I'm sure you all have had that problem, where we're there for hours before the beginning of the event, both for summer and winter, not only because of acclimation for winter, but also to find those spots where the other photographers are not. And we'll see. So in this particular case, say this was, there was just this one little spot, because you see how dark the backgrounds were. The stadiums were covered, and there was just this shaft of light coming down, and it was like, it was panic for photographers, at least for me. And I found this one little spot where the pole vaulters would come over. Now, the beautiful thing about the Olympics is, for anybody that shot sports, especially amateur sports, especially things like track and field, where there's a peak moment, is that colleges and high schools, things like getting over the high bar and stuff, the amateurs are knocking the bar over every time. So you're getting crap most of the time, but the bar falling, or them kicking it, or them breaking out of form, et cetera, et cetera. But the Olympics, everybody's an expert. So what you're getting is these repetitive times in which you can find these spots. And so this is a perfect example, again, of sort of using the graphics of the sport, rather than just worrying about somebody holding up a gold medal. We're dealing with the graphics of the sport itself and the beauty of the sport. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. The other thing that Michael Newler also mentioned, I remember people going to Marty Forscher and having the lubricants removed from the camera for wintertime work.
That's right. We called during the Winter Olympics. We called, and this is specifically, I'll tell you the story about this photograph. We went to Marty Forscher back in the day. We talked to Marty at length about all of those exact issues, batteries. He was very, very, very helpful. If anybody doesn't remember, Marty was a god in the world of professional photographers and repair and invention. He just kept the first generation of really great photojournalists safe. I mean, he had one great quote. He said, "I build these things to withstand everything, because photographers are going out and going into wars and risking their lives. My cameras have to work in those situations." And the same is with the Olympics and things like that. So he was keeping these cameras working. And we talked to him about lubricants and whether or not they would withstand. And he said that the current lubricants at the time we were shooting, say, especially Lillehammer, were sufficient to withstand. And they did. They worked fine, no static, all of that. Lillehammer was the biggest problem. It was -6. The sun you never saw the sun. It literally, it just crested just above the horizon. It was just dark all the time. So this was a situation, and again, about access, I put this specifically to talk about, they gave the photographers a place to stand near the end. And there's a big run. So you see them coming down for quite a ways. So if you've got a huge lens, and that's what most of the photographers, all they really wanted. But I realized I wanted something different, and I wanted to get closer. So me and my, but they had stopped all the chairlifts going up. Only a few photographers were allowed at the very start. So my assistant and I went into the chairlift that was still letting amateur skiers. And we went up the chairlift on the other side of the mountain and hiked for hours over the mountain in order to get in position. So I was probably using an 80 to 200 millimeter lens. So this is not even a big long lens. I was that close to be able to use a relatively, the 80 to 200 zoom is like a normal lens at the Olympics. Everything's these huge, which I rented in those days. And then now I own all the big long lens, 600s, 500s, all of those lenses that I use in the Olympics now. But this was done, and we literally hiked, and it was one of the stupidest things I ever did, because at a certain points, the snow was almost up to my chest. And getting through that much snow and everything, we gave ourselves hours, but we're able to get these very, very close up pictures. But again, running in the opposite direction to, then some sports are just hard to cover.
And you don't want to be in the opposite direction here.
Good point. So this was probably Seoul, Korea. Yes, I believe this was Seoul, Korea. Seoul, Korea was 1988. And I got the great photographs of this entire foreground, the bottom of the picture being full of people. And before they're allowed, when they say on your mark, get set, go, boom, everybody had to bows up, got those beautiful pictures. But this is right at the end. This was the last person on the line. And so that kind of telling a small story, using the targets and using them as the graphic element, and just one person left, and how incredible being at the Olympics is for any real competitor. The host country of each Olympics is allowed to add, I believe, up to 3 sports. So this is Salt Lake City, and Salt Lake City was 2002. So by that time, snowboarding had become very popular all over the world, and the United States, thinking about their superiority in that regard, had at Salt Lake City introduced snowboarding. It has become it's very popular amongst young people. One of the things is that they drop off sports that are sort of becoming old-fashioned, that many people don't compete in well, and they try to add. So this year they're going to have rock climbing. They're going to have all kinds of trick cycling, on the bowls and everything. All of that stuff's being added in order to keep the newer generations, to add the new sports as they're happening. But in this particular case, 2002, they were adding snowboarding. And this is a photograph of a single snowboarder in, I believe it was a giant slalom, and they called it giant slalom. And I had fraternity brothers who were water poloists. I believe this was Seoul, Korea also. So this goes all the way back to 1988, way back in the early days of my, and again, I would talk about film only in that how the technology has changed. I'll use this as an example, how the technology has changed. In those days, we had to do 2 and 3 runs of film a day. And in those days, they had Kodak would run 24 hours a day. You could get your film developed at Kodak. And so you would take the roll in, and 3 hours later, you could get your roll back. And we would do 2 or 3 runs a day, and then go back and edit. They had rooms where you just film everywhere, film hanging. People didn't want the film put in their little cardboard things. Some people would only wanted their strips so that they could see the sequences, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody had some kind of different thing. And Kodak would not only process your film for free, but also give you a roll of film. For every roll of film you process, they would give you a free roll of film to shoot the next day. So it was quite but it was extremely brutal. They would have.
So these was E6? Hectochromes?
I believe in the early days, I was shooting Kodachrome.
Really? They set up a Kodachrome process?
Yeah, Kodachrome and E6, absolutely. And they would process other films, like
sure.
You could shoot Fuji as long as you were allow it to be in Kodak chemistry, which was fine in most places. So they would do that. But no, I believe in the early days, I used to shoot. I shot so much Kodachrome at one point that Kodak allowed for the daily pickup and drop off to do just the labs and me. So they literally came to my front door of my studio. So Kodachrome was a big part. If I were to turn this around, you'd see a million slides in drawers over here. I would say probably half of it is Kodachrome. So it was a brutal thing. We had to get all the way into town, process, come back, and we had to do this. And sometimes we were quite a distance away. The big Sports Illustrated had runners, so that you throw your film into these little bags, and you mark that you wanted to push it or pull it or whatever it was. And they had the runners, so the runners knew exactly where, and they had motorcycles they could drive through the traffic and all of that. But for schmucks like me, we had to literally run back and forth every day, and I usually had an assistant do that. And then we set up a little editing suite wherever we were staying, in the hotel or wherever we were staying. Again, being an international citizen, a citizen of the world, I was not a homer. You hear that term applied to, the team, your hometown team. I was not a homer. So I was shooting everybody. The best pictures were not necessarily the winners. The best pictures were not necessarily the people who were winning the medals, coming in high places. Often the best pictures were just the people in the middle of the scrum, that was where and this was Greco-Roman wrestling. And we don't normally do very well. We did well. No, it was regular wrestling that we did well a few years ago, but Greco-Roman, not so much. And so you see a lot of Middle Eastern people who have done very well. so this is Belarus, the guy with the BLR there. I don't know who the other fellow is, where he's from. But anyway, this was a sport that we were not so much interested in the United States, and we got very little coverage because of that. But I was shooting as many different sports as I could get to. Gymnastics is a big American ticket. American, Russia, several other, Japan, a bunch of other countries do very, very well. This was approximately, this would have been 96, around just before Atlanta. And this was the Olympic trials, which happened to be in Boston. And so we're getting those really beautiful graphic images of man, woman against the nature of the sport that they, and this one's a perfect example of this guy just about to jump up and get the onto the rings in gymnastics. This is Lillehammer. And this was a case in which, because I'm just rank and file photographer, I'm not being able to put remote cameras like Sports Illustrated and some of the other big agencies. So my point of view has to be created almost being in person. So I had always thought that being above the ski jumpers. Now, this is something I dreamed up years before I was able to pull it off. And we got there, this was Lillehammer, brutally cold. I mean, brutally cold. But we got there early before security got there. And we climbed up the mountain to above the ski jump. So that we were higher than the ski jumpers themselves. And this was with a 600mm lens. And security got there and saw us, my little crew, I think there were 4 of us, with tripods and everything, 600mm lenses, standing at the top of the mountain here. And they just, with a bullhorn and everything, yelled for us to come down. Go, get down, you can't be up there, get down, get down, get down. Whatever language they were using, Norwegian, I guess. I didn't speak Norwegian, so I said, I don't understand. But anyway, they were yelling us. They couldn't get it. And I just kept thumbing my nose at them, saying, come up and get me, basically in English. So, but we were able to get, so those, that pattern behind you is the crowds of people, because different sports, ski jumping is very, very popular in Scandinavia. So there were 250,000 people in the group. So this was really wonderful ability to be able to, and this was a handheld 600mm lens, 600 f4. I still have it. This is Barcelona. As anybody can see in the background there, that's the Sagrada Familia. And again, there are a few other photographers that discovered this place too. So there's a few photographs. Actually, I think one won a big award, but this was the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, big breakout year, because they tried to do the entire thing by subway. So a lot of the venues were fairly close, so we could get around, we could see, and they utilized the city to a T. So they developed, and this was a situation where this was the high dive. And I saw this in walking by, I saw it. If I could get down there, I bet you I could put the diver with the Sagrada Familia in the background. And we snuck down and got in that position. And my assistant, he got arrested, I had to go bail him out later, but I was able to stay there for the whole time. I was sort of hidden with the longer lenses, and took him off to jail, and I went and bailed, like I said, bailed him out. But these are the kind of photographs that we were able to take because of that. Again, gymnastics is a huge ticket in the United States, and this was the Olympic trials here in Boston. My clients were, I have to go and get a different client for virtually every Olympics. It's because they're moved to a different part of the world. Different people have different interests. Very often a big sponsor in one because they're in their home country, or they have an interest, or they're selling equipment, et cetera, will have a big interest in one, but the next Olympics, they could care less. So only maybe twice have I ever overlapped Olympics to Olympics with the same client. This was a client that designed the uniforms for several of the teams. So I went and photographed uniforms, and this was a Japanese team. And again, I got the perfectly focused pictures of in this particular case, speed skating. They're beautiful, beautiful. And these uniforms are high tech. You cannot believe. I didn't know that at the time. I was learning just with them, but they're super high tech. And so I made this sort of very romantic image using the ice. And in this was the last year, how complicated the technology changes. The last year that they had the speed skating outside. They pulled many of the sports that we've seen over the years from outside to inside, so they're covered, so they can control the temperature, so they don't have to worry about rain or the temperature of the ice, et cetera, et cetera. So this was the last year that they had the Olymp. So you're getting these wonderful highlights in what was, in that particular case, it was a very gray day. This was Atlanta. So this is the last big Olympics in the United States. Yes, yeah, Atlanta. No. We've had a Winter Olympics since then that I covered. And this is rowing on the in Atlanta, and getting those sort of these competitions. Again, this was very hard to do because they build the stadiums for the maximum capacities, but they don't necessarily always, they're not always concerned with where the best places for photographing. So we have to go and climb up and climb down and find these bizarre spots to get to. This is a perfect example. This was Sydney, Australia. And my assistant and I found this one spot right in the middle of the crowds. This is not where the photographer's on the side. The photographers like to see both sides, but in this particular case, and beach volleyball is one of those sports that they've introduced in the last several Olympics as being a young person's, very hip, very new, very different. They have the standard volleyball, but they go out and they bring in all of this sand. They literally have to bring in the sand in order to make it very consistent. And so the beach, even though this was on their famous beach, the sand was all new, and they completely resalt it every day in order to be able to photograph. But this was women's and very, very hard to photograph because these people move around and jump and are not always in a poetic form. But getting the ball, getting everything all together was really interesting. My assistant really worked very hard for us to get these wonderful pictures. And this was, again, Australia. This is Italy. This was Torino, Winter Olympics. and again, trying to get different kind of pictures. And I saw how they leaned, how much they leaned coming around the turns. So I literally snuck into a place in the, by the time Torino came around, which was 2006, security was getting smarter and smarter and smarter and preventing mostly the tourists from moving around. So they make the Olympics get harder and harder and harder to cover from that aspect of having access. But I was able to get into position here and saw that this is women's, and you can kind of see the uniforms here. How incredible that they're all custom made and everything. But I wanted that lean, but I also wanted to and it was hard. I shot many pictures, and I had to focus. I had to focus on the little red markers there and try to use a motor drive so that when the person came around, I would get a frame that was close to that so that they were in focus. So that everybody, the person was in focus. But that's how we got this. And we got several like this, but this was really, and this is going to be, John knows it, maybe he can post it. I'm having an exhibit of my 13 years of 13 attempts at the Olympics at a gallery, Bridge Gallery in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And it's starting the day that the Olympics start and goes for the entire duration plus. But I'm having an exhibit during the Olympics this year here in Massachusetts.
Is this the one at the Bridge Gallery?
That is correct. If you can post that on the thing, anybody that's in this area, I'm going to do a little talk about it. So if anybody's still interested after I blab on here, this is doing it again. Jesus. Again, photograph. This is Athens, 2004, and this is photographing those sports that nobody pays any attention. ABC, nobody pays attention to, but people are competing face to face in these beautiful things. And I actually had an assistant who was Japanese for this particular Olympics. And I saw that there was a whole contingent of Japanese tourists in the far corner. And I sent her, I know this wasn't racist, I don't think, but I sent her, she was Japanese and they were from Japan. So I sent her to sit amongst them for quite a while. And when they didn't mess with her, me and my other assistant all went and sat next to her and in order to be able to get into this position. But it was really very strategic to be sure that they weren't going to get mad at us for taking up somebody else's seats. And this is Torino, Italy. Let's see if I can go back to the, and I'm right on the railing. I noticed how they were coming around. Several people have done this, but I got right next to the Olympic rings. I got yelled at by a lot of photographers because they stand up on the hill and just sort of pan with the people. Everybody gets the same shot. That's where, but I stood right at the edge so that I was just out of their way, just out of their range, but right on the edge where they were coming right in my, so I'm using probably a 15mm lens here and was able to get several.
Question came in is, when did you just get to switch over from film to digital?
That's a good one. Wait a minute. Let me figure this out. It was this Olympics. So we switched over.
2006.
2006, yes. And being a chicken, I shot almost every event, film and digital, because I didn't know how fast I was going to be and whether or not the systems, whether I was going to be able to transmit, in the same way, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that stuff was being worked out at the Olympics. So I was developing half the shots with film and shooting the other half with digital.
What
So
about
that's my,
autofocus?
huh?
What about switching to autofocus?
I started autofocus on another assignment before this. So I had, yes, I use autofocus. Now that we're old people, I'm using it almost all the time now. But in those days, but in this particular case, I probably pre-focused. So I knew where they were literally within inches of each other. So I pre-focused at a spot just above the surface of the ice so that they were in focus when they came around, and used a very high shutter speed in order to freeze the motion.
Thanks.
I don't know what this is. I thought it would straighten out by now.
It was working for a while there.
It was.
That's
We try to create these tableaus. Again, I told you about shooting at the beginning of races. There's another shot here I'll even make, but this is a case in which this is probably the third hurdle. And I lined up on the other side of the stadium. So
yeah, I was going to say, I almost always see runners going left to right. This is
exactly. In that, yes. So I'm on the other side of the stadium, and I noticed that the lead runners, like you saw early on, are all together in the first couple of hurdles, but they sort of strung out. And I've used this technique often, and I'll show you another photograph soon where this is almost, I'm going to screw up his name, but Meyerbrigg, the guy who did the sequences of horses and etc. This is almost, so it's almost like, each person is adopting a Meyerbrigg, but this is exactly what they look like. So the stragglers are just as important in this case as the leaders. That's what's so beautiful. Look at what's going on here. This is just beautiful. So, and this is Salt Lake City.
wow.
And I did, in fact, do the dumb thing and stood with the photographers where they were supposed to. I went and disobeyed my own rule and stood with them on the side, right at the bottom, where the IOC wanted everybody to be. And I just thought it was just a horrible, because most newspapers, etc., interested in is who comes in first. And that's not important to me always. So not always, but often. And this is side by side, as you see the red flags and the blue flags. And literally they're supposed to be identical courses, red and blue, and they're head to head in order to make the competition. The fact that snowboarding was this sort of boring thing of people just going around and coming down and one at a time. So they tried to they use a head to head. So there's two snowboarders racing against each other on two identical courses side by side. And I noticed how beautiful graphically, I went all the way at the end of the run and with a 600 millimeter shot and was shooting the two people. And in this particular case, just as I started the motor drive, one of them fell. And so there's only one, so this sort of solitary graphic image this is a really big print. It will be in the show coming up next month. But this kind of graphic nature of showing what the beauty of and the graphics. The Olympics do a superb job of making no advertising. If you've noticed, no McDonald's, coffee, whatever it is, liquor, nothing, or at the Olympics. You can't have it on your uniform. You can't have stickers or so that the helmets and all of that, which you would buy, might have say whatever it is, or the uniforms. You have to make them special for the Olympics so that they don't have advertising on, which is great for photography. Great for photography. But this is if you look right at the top of the image, this is where they put me. I lined up with all of those photographers at the beginning of the day. There are hundreds. And I went, obey your rule, Lou. And I literally say, go 180, turn 180 degrees from wherever it is that all the photographers are. So I literally went to the other end of me and my assistant went all the way to the other end of this is the 110-meter women's high hurdles. And so it was just, the graphics of the nature of their having what they have to, 10 hurdles in front of them. You're telling the whole story of how many hurdles there are. They're all together in this one. So like I said, the beginnings of the races are often where the real action is going on. You see the repetitive nature, you see all of the things going on, and you see the photographers who are at the other end. And this picture is sold over and over and over and over again. It's really become a very, very big seller for us.
Michael's asking a question about the graphics. Which is more important to you, the graphics or the athlete?
That's a good question. The real answer is the photograph. So the athlete, as say in this one, is the story, is the focal point. But like I said, very often it's not necessarily the best, the number one, the one that comes in first. It's somebody in the middle of the group that may give me the best, that may get me the best height, that may give me the best position. So I'm trying to think through the graphics before the race is actually happening, so that I've got something that's telling the rest of the story, what the event is, what the surroundings are, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is complicated, but the individual, and I will tell you a quick story. Tell me, John, what we're doing, how we're doing on time.
Oh, we're doing fine. We're at an hour now, but we can go as long as you like.
Okay, I got a few more. I'll tell you a story. I've told this story before. I was shooting giant slalom, and I'm going to screw up. I know what Olympics it was, but my head is blanking. I do a rehearsal before so I know which. But anyway, I was doing a giant slalom. Again, me and my assistant had climbed up the mountain, not the Albertville where we had to climb way up, but part of the way. And the skiers were coming down, and the big winners had already been down and down and down, and we were literally finished, and everybody had left because the winners that were done, everybody knew who was going to win. These were the people who were seated way back. They weren't going to win, etc. There was one person left on this huge expanse of white snow with flags and everything. And me and my assistant, who were packing up all our equipment to trek down the hill. One person, a woman in a big fur coat, big, huge fur coat, standing right there next to the fences to keep everybody back. And she was looking, and I said, that is awful odd. She's the only person left on the hill. So I went over to her, and turns out she was from Mexico. So she spoke enough English so that I could have a conversation. I said, why are you still here? She said, my son's about to come down. He placed, I was able to get photographs and send them to her in Mexico. He placed 54th. So nobody cared. All the tourists, all the TVs, all the everybody had left, she had a son at the top of the mountain coming down. So she was the only spectator he had at the Olympics. And that was when when the light bulb went off over my head about the Olympics. He came in 54th. Nobody cared except his mother. He was 54th best skier in the world. Think about that. And that's where the denouement of my thinking about how to cover the Olympics. He was the 54th best skier in the world. That's an incredible. He had made it to the Olympics. And that's why the question about whether it's the subject, yes, it's the subject, but they're also inside of a story.
Thank you.
This was Atlanta. This was one where I had to lie my way into the spot. Again, this was the first Olympics where they brought swimming. I told you about bringing speed skating inside. This was the first Olympics where they brought swimming inside so that they can control the weather and control the temperature and make everything more and more equal. Anyway, this was a relay race. And I saw how when they touched off, how the next swimmer had to jump over the one that had just touched. And I was really aiming at that. So I did a little bit of blur here and everything, but I had to lie my way into the spot, which was right down front, again, on the opposite place where all the other photographers were. And I told security that, oh, I need to be here. And she said, oh, no, you can't be here. You can't be here. I said, oh, no, please, my client, my publisher says I have to get these races right here, right? She says, no, you can't be here. I said, no, look, there's nobody sitting here. These were the expensive seats, the most expensive seats in the whole place. I said, nobody's sitting here. I said, if anybody comes, I will get up and move. And she didn't bother me for the rest of the event. So that's how I got this photograph. So you're talking about access, getting into places where you get better and better photographs.
Do you find yourself showing up in other photographers' work because you're at the other end?
No, no, I don't. As a matter of fact, that's a very, very good question in terms of that, but I don't, no. No, and that's one of the things, the etiquette is when you are in certain, when there's somebody coming off the podium and they got their, you don't want to be in other people's photographs. And it's really etiquette to get out of the way. It's a big important thing about the sort of fraternity sorority of, okay, this was Salt Lake City. This was cross country, as you can see. And this was, I've covered the whole thing. I literally covered beginning, middle, and these events go forever, because they're 7 miles, 10 kilometers. So they go on forever, and they put people in, they put them one after, they give them 30 seconds, a minute, whatever it is between each skier, et cetera. So it goes forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So I was able to cover this from several different vantage points. And then toward the end, again, everybody's leaving. And the lowest seeds, this guy is from, he's from someplace like Tanzania or someplace like that. I can't remember. I have it written down somewhere, I'm sure. But he's an African skier getting on the Olympics in a winter sport. So he was not seated very well. So he was toward the end, and and I noticed this very black face, and you don't see a lot of black faces at the Winter Olympics. So I literally took off across the field because now almost everybody was gone. so I could sort of sneak in and get into the places where they wouldn't normally allow me. I literally crawled across half of this area. They did a brilliant job in that they took a big area and the race just wound around and around. So even in the stands, you could see almost everybody during the whole event. That was brilliant. Whereas in the old days, they went off forever and then they came back and you only saw them for a few minutes. But this one, you saw almost everybody everywhere. And I jumped off into the snow and ran and dragged myself across the big long lens. And the snow was so deep, I literally went up to my chest. I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to sink down and they were never going to find me until springtime. Anyway, I was able to fight my way out, but I was able to finally get this guy in position. And I just love the graphics. Again, you know, you asked the question about what's more important, the subject matter of this dark uniform, this dark skin against the white snow, and the anomaly of an African competing in the Olympics. It's really, really wonderful. This was the Olympics that I was shooting half and half film, half digital. And this was the, this is called the biathlon. They shoot and they race, shoot and race, shoot and race. And again, this is a sport that doesn't do well usually in the United States. Although we had a couple of Olympics ago, we had a couple of very, very, very good people who did in fact win. But this is invented, conducted, and specialized in by Slavic and Scandinavian countries. And so this was the team event. So you're seeing multiple people tagging off, and just like in a relay, it's a relay. So I think this is Athens, and this is the kayaking. This is kayaking. This is Salt Lake City. This was the same event as you saw the African skier. This was during the heat of so I was shooting between the legs. I found a place where I was able to get right in line and shoot. It didn't happen very often, but I saw every now and then I could shoot between the legs of a skier who was in front and then cover somebody. And this was so that you're seeing between the legs of one of the skiers. And this one was one of the most complicated photographs we ever did. I'd always wanted to photograph the Olymp marathon. This was Atlanta. Always wanted to, and I had attempted it several times and had always been very disappointed because you can never quite get in front of the runners to look straight in their face. There's always an angle. It always had something. So I took a map. This is about 2 years before the Olympics. I got a map of the route of the marathon in Atlanta, a street map. I figured out where the sun would be, which turned out to be absolutely of no value because it was a rainy day. But I found so that I had the sun behind me, and found a place where the runners were going to take a sharp turn, a right angle turn to follow the field. In this case, they were going to go to your right, their left. So they were going to go off on the right side of the picture, and they're going to take a sharp turn. So I could be on the street corner directly in front of them, right across just before they took the turn, and shoot them coming up that street. That was the idea. And so we had a 600 and a 300. I had two huge tripods running, and we got there really, really early. We had parkas on. We had these huge rain parkas because it was pouring rain, et cetera, et cetera. We got there before everybody, before the police, before everybody, and set up. And ABC was really angry. because we were in front of them. They wanted us to get out of the way, but we had gotten there first. And we were able to get maybe 10 frames from each camera before they took the turn. And but I was able to get this picture. But the flat lighting probably helps us a little bit in a funny kind of way. But this picture literally took 2 years to take. This is Rio. This is the last Olympics. The last Olympics, Summer Olympics. And this is Rio, and this is basketball. Big ticket, big basketball, American, you know, the dream team, all of that, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the big ticket. And I had a great client for this. The only time I've ever been comfortable doing the Olympics. I still didn't get you never get any sleep at the Olympics, because if you're not shooting, you're editing. And you have to stuff something down, but this is the Croatia against Argentina. Rio again, the last several here, the last Olympics. Boxing, getting into position to be able to photograph boxing, and I'd always wanted to do that. I'd always wanted to get a photograph with all three, the referee and the boxers. This woman is doing the we used to call it
jump?
No, hop,
Or
step,
triple?
and jump.
The triple jump.
Triple jump. They call it triple jump now. When I was competing, it was called the hop, step, and jump. But she's in the step. So she does a hop. This is the step phase. This is the second part, and then jump. These athletes are unbelievable, just unbelievable. And this was the one I was telling you about, how I've done this, use that sort of Maya bridge technique in different events. You get it sort of vicariously in the hurdles, but in this one, it happens almost every lap, because everybody's sort of strung out. This is the steeplechase. And the one that's the most interesting is the water jump, so that you get both the runners trying to span almost all of the water part of this, and getting each other wet, getting themselves wet, et cetera, et cetera. But you're getting that Meyer Bridge effect. Men's long jump during the decathlon, the premier event for who is the greatest all-around athlete in the world, and this was during the long jump. So this was a really wonderful event. And you see how I'm covering. This is as close as the Olympics get to the old-fashioned not velodrome. Now we call it the velodrome, but the old-fashioned stadium that the ancient Greeks used to have, with everybody thronging and thumbs up, thumbs down, and all of that. This is the closest you get. You really do feel like you're in that sort of a stadium effect, because it's so tight, so tight, so tight. You could literally, which I've always been afraid of, covering this event more than once, always been afraid of. Some of the athletes literally get so close to the upper edge that you can touch them. And I'm always afraid that somebody's going to reach out and try to affect the race by pushing somebody or something like that. I've never seen that happen, but this is the case in point. And this is the cover of the invitation to the upcoming, this is fencing. Again, I covered fencing once before, but the Rio, they get better and better and better at creating these venues and then lighting them. And this is a case in point where my client and I both went around to the other side, and I found a place where you could get more than one. You couldn't get all three, but they were able to compete in 3 different events at the same time. And I was able to get to line up. And not only that, but to get the peak moment. rhythmic gymnastics. It's Rio. And this goes all the way back to Barcelona. But I put this at the end because this was one of those photographs where I was thrown out of this position several times. I would sneak back, wait for just before they would fire the gun to start the race in order to get this particular picture. It just lined up so well. And then finally, the security just kept coming over and throwing me out, throwing me out, throwing me out. But I kept going back and was able to. And I believe that's it.
Cool. Well, Jeff was asking if you ever got to shoot the original Dream Team.
No. That's one of the big problems. My clients come first, and they have very specific events that they're interested in. So I have to cover those. And then I try to do others, especially for my agent. My agent gives me and says, this is a discus thrower from Sweden. We need you to cover that. So I have to go to those. And then the last are the things that I do. And the gymnastics tickets and the basketball tickets are probably, and opening and closing ceremonies are the hardest tickets to get. So I've never done the Dream Team because they're so hard to get the tickets for them. So no.
I got a hello for you from Jack Rosnicki over on Facebook. He's watching us there.
He's my boy. I've known him forever. Hello, Jeff.
And did you ever cover any of the hockey games? I know you went to RPI as a student.
About that. No, I haven't been to a hockey game. That's a good one. I have not been to the hockey games in the Olympics. I've done luge and all of that stuff. I did do, what's that thing where you throw the rock? I did do that once. I thought that
shot put?
No.
Disc?
No, slide it on the ice.
Curling.
Curling. I did do that once. So
Nice.
I thought that was pretty odd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to your photo when they brought the swimming indoors, Michael was asking if you had issues with fogging and things like that.
With what
and
now?
That also goes fogging from the humidity of the swimming pool.
No. They control the temperature. They control the temperature pretty well. Actually, the Atlanta, I'll tell you a cute little story about Atlanta, again, about that sort of international, but no, I've had fogging outside at the Olympics, but once it acclimates, the cameras really work very, very, very well. I learned how to work, and to this day, with gloves on. I have worked in Lillehammer. I actually had 3 pairs of gloves, and I could change film with 3 pairs of gloves on when it was snowing. You know how hard that is to do?
Yeah, I can imagine.
This is a case in point where the Coca-Cola, because it was Atlanta, did a very, very nice job. And this was really wonderful. And this was one of the most, I don't think they may have done it since, but I haven't paid attention. But one of the things was they put times on each one of the heats, which they do in general, but they time everybody, which they do in general. But they also, in Atlanta, put what that meant for each person in every heat. So that meant that somebody may come in last in a heat, so they're never going to even get close to the finals. But that person, time goes up, and then they will say, fastest time in Argentina. Mm-hmm. So they would have a national record that they scored at the Olympics, and they would tell you that, so that they really did start to really make it a very egalitarian kind of situation where you knew, so somebody came out of and got booed. People were booing people at Atlanta when they came out of the pool last and things like that. But if you looked up on the scoreboard, you saw that person may have had not only a personal best, but also it was the fastest time that anybody in their country had ever swum.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I guess the elephant in the room right now is Tokyo.
Yes.
Are you going?
It doesn't look like it. We have not
Okay.
been able to score a client for that. And also, we haven't even been able to figure out how journalists are going to be able to go. Many people are being denied access. They're only allowing a certain number of spectators, Japanese spectators even.
Right.
So no, we're not going to be there.
I'm going to stop your share so we can see you.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I did it.
Okay.
You're back. You're our hero again now.
So no, I won't be, it's breaking my heart, but no. And we had a client for last summer when it was supposed to happen. And they went AWOL. So we don't have a client for this summer. We thought we had it all wrapped up.
Yeah. So if folks in the audience have questions they want to ask Lou.
Absolutely. You going to raise their hand or they go?
No, so
You can just
Ian.
go ahead.
Ian.
yes. So if you're not going to do an Olympics or other Olympics, perhaps, what would you be looking forward to do in the future?
Well, I'm a big TV. As a matter of fact, when I'm at the Olympics, summer or winter, one of the things I always make part of the rental of the space is that I have access to TV. So I'm watching. Now, I'm not only am I an Olympic freak, and I can tell you the times and who won back to the 40s. But I've watched it on TV religiously. And so I make it part of my rental agreement from whoever's renting me a space that I have a TV. And once we had to rent a TV to bring it into the space in order for me to watch. And so to your point, I will be watching it on TV, but I will be exhibiting. And so I'm doing several talks actually during the Olympics. And we're showing the pictures from these Olympics. And so that's what I'm going to try to make a big deal of that. So I can't be there, but I'm there in spirit, and I'm going to bring other people along with me if I can.
Yeah,
So-
Jeff, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Lou, great photography.
Don't we know each other?
Well, we're friends on Facebook,
Yes.
and I think we've run across each other
That's right.
probably in New York.
Yes.
But two things. Number one, I had not really delved into your website. I was really impressed and moved and kind of, particularly in this day and age, your final exposure work, because it's interesting how, I'm against the death penalty fundamentally, because I don't think there's anything that anybody could do, maybe short of Hitler, that is worth killing somebody for justice. On the other hand, I don't know if you saw it last week. John Oliver had a thing about prisons and the fact that they got prisons in Texas and Florida and Nevada that have no fucking air conditioning, and prisoners are dying. Well, mainly everything is getting hotter, and of course the particularly private prisons where it's all profit based. But the thing about it is that I just can't fathom how, I don't think there have been a lot of federal executions, but there are states that continue to execute people, and
That's correct.
and there's a real consistency on the way those people look, aren't there?
That
lot
was
of black and brown.
So you're throwing the shade on me because I got to bring that issue up. But yes, you're absolutely right. For all of those that do not know what Jeff is, and I've known this is a wonderful photographer. I mean, I've seen his work for most of my career, but
Well, we're both old.
What's that?
We're both old.
That's but I photographed 27 people in 14 different death rows in the United States a few years ago, did 2 books on the issue, and it took years to do the book, to do the project. But he brings up the issue of, so I did it, and I was trying to talk about the issue of the death penalty and how no nation, including the United States, could do it correctly. And it's been made into unconstitutional, constitutional, unconstitutional. It's going back and forth. But he brings up the point of that we are executing people, and we just executed somebody on federal death row within the last couple of months. Been the first person no, actually, I believe there've been 2 people on federal death row.
That Trump authorized before he.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Absolutely. So we do have we tried to get on federal death row. Actually, I take it back. We did do 1 person out of the 27 who was on federal death row at the time. So yes, we got into federal. We weren't able to make military death row. That was the one thing that we got shot down for. But anyway, so thank you for bringing that up. It's on the website. The name
Put
of
a
the
link
book.
to it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. And so anybody that's interested in the issue, everything on the website is in black and white. We shot color, black and white. We shot everything, 2 1/4, all of that stuff. So it was a major project, and it is in parallel to exactly what this Olympic project is, in that we are calling it, and we have you in between the commercial jobs, we almost are always doing some kind of long-term project that takes a long-term. Now long-term could be 2 weeks, but in the case of the death row, that was about 6 years of photography and another year to write the book. So you get this. Yes, you got your hand raised again, or is that?
No, it's still raised. Well, I did have a second question. Are you and Archie LaSalle brothers from another mother?
Yes. You know him?
No, I'm friends with him as well. I like his black and white stuff.
Yes.
And I noticed that he's in the Northeast.
That's right. He's the East. I could throw a rock almost to his house. He's in Cambridge. Yeah.
And I also noted that you've been a past president of ASMP New England chapter. And I appreciate people that work on behalf of the industry. I was president of APA National, and trying to get photographers to do the right thing is worse than fucking cat herding.
That's right. We are, in a funny kind of way, both at the Olympics, like I've sort of mentioned, and in general, we are sometimes our own worst enemy. That's a big part of how complicated this profession is, and it's something that we need to be get a little bit smarter about. I think you're absolutely right.
So,
Yes.
Yeah,
Mike
Michael.
Miller, are you also considered an editorial photographer?
Yes.
Were you a member of?
But
Were you
let me. Yes, I've done a lot of editorial work, but we consider ourselves, and I know that there's a fine distinction, documentary photographer. Does that help at all?
Well, actually, I was leaning into. Were you a member of EP, Editorial Photographers, up in Boston?
No, I don't know them.
Oh, you know Seth Resnick?
Yes, I know Seth well, but he's down in
He's down in Florida.
Florida.
He
moved.
actually was president and started EP.
I see. Okay. All right. Yeah, I know Seth very, very well. Very well.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to look into it.
Well,
Elizabeth,
Mueller,
you had your hand up.
EP doesn't really exist anymore,
No, I know, but I was leading up to it. I didn't want to say this defunct the group, so I was just leading up to it. I baited him.
Yeah. No,
So Elizabeth,
go ahead. Yes.
Hi, can you speak to your Pan-African project also?
Oh, boy. You get me into all of them. I am, as I mentioned, I am to Michael's question about editorial. I'm what I consider a documentary photographer, and we have maintained the Olympics as a long-term project, pregnancy is a long-term project, death row is a long-term project, and currently, although COVID has really made it really complicated, we are in the effort of trying to photograph all 54 countries in Africa for a long-term project in order to talk about contemporary modern Africa, not historical, not slavery and all of that. We're talking about what's going on and the amazing things that are happening country by country in the unique. And so that's called Pan-Africa Project. That's also on the website, everybody. So if you go to www.photojones with an FOTOJONES.com, you can also get Pan-Africa, but we have now photographed 14 countries. As some mathematician said, that's a third of the way. And we are working on trying to get out of here because we haven't been in Africa for 2 years because of COVID. We're trying to get back as early as November. And that is photographing literally industry, culture, education, medicine, everything. And it's really, so if anybody here has any connections in any country in Africa, please email me. And if you went to school with somebody, if you did time there where you were working for, if you did an NGO, if you have any connection to Africa, please get in touch with me. But am I answering your question or not?
You are, and I'll send you, my daughter currently lives in Nairobi, so I'll send you, she has a lot of connections, and obviously in Nairobi, she's a creative, and then also in Uganda, so.
Those are two countries I have not been to yet, so that would be
Really?
perfect. Yes. Well, the project is very complicated. It's not the time. Hopefully, maybe John will bring me back sometime and I can talk about, because it's really a huge project. I have an exhibit coming up of that work in November, but choosing the next country the algorithm is very complex in order so that we're not just concentrating on the famous places. The last place I was in just before COVID was Gabon. And I'd be willing to bet that not half of you know where have ever even heard of Gabon. So we're trying to be sure that we're including those places that have not gotten the sort of PR that other more famous places have been. So is that
Sure.
making any sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lou, where did you go to school?
You probably have never heard of it. I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, called RPI. It's a
No, I know it.
a tech. Oh, you do know it. You do know it. Yes, it's a
just
sort of
outside of Albany, right across the river.
That's right. That's exactly right. My degrees were in physics. I went to
Really?
graduate school in physics. Yes. Stupid. And I tell people, that people say, how did you get from physics to photography? I said, I'm dyslexic. And they both began with PH, and I walked into the wrong room and never came out. So, I'm a photographer now.
Very good.
Well, any other questions from the audience before we shut down here? This has been a lot of fun.
I love the
and
fact that you're very
interesting.
well spoken, Lou. I have to admire. I admire that you're very well spoken and intellectually highly educated. I like that as well.
Well,
but I personally think that your mindset really is more in tune to the graphics of the image, and the athlete becomes part of your graphics.
That I say to people, I'm placing you as a graphic element in my photograph. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But sometimes those people are the focus in more ways than just the graphics, you know, that may be somebody famous, so that they become, you know, but I'm doing a job for a client coming up. I was actually just scouting locations last week for a big client coming up next month. And they hired me specifically for making their executives and their people, featuring them and making them comfortable and looking like, you know, but they want the environments to be as tantamount, because that's what they're selling. They're selling environments.
Cool.
Does that make any
Mike,
sense?
yeah.
So-
Mike Bard has his hand up.
Okay. Mike Bard.
Got to
The
unmute.
Mike Bard?
You're muted, Mike.
Unmute. There we go. Hey, Lou.
Hey, I know you.
And I know you too. I just wanted to say it's an amazing presentation. I love the photograph. I tuned in all the way down here in Florida. And, you know, you got to let me know when you're downtown again.
Absolutely. This guy sold me cameras though for the last 30 years, 40, 30 years.
I was going to say, it's been a pleasure working with you, and it's great to see the results of all the gear that I've unloaded. I've sold you.
I still have a
presentation.
tripod you guys sold me.
That big heavy Gitzo that nobody wants.
No, it's not a Gitzo. You guys sold me a really nice, lightweight that's been all over Africa. It's been almost every
That's
country
exactly.
I've been to in Africa. Yeah. Thank you.
The project's done great. The pictures are amazing. And I just, you know where I am when you need me.
You got it. Thank you, sir.
All right. And John,
So
thank
Mike,
you
who
for
do you
hosting
sell
the
for?
event. I used to own E.T. Levine in Boston, and
That's right.
now I've got my own little business, but that you can find me on Facebook or through Lou or somebody, but this
Cool.
isn't here to be advertised.
Okay.
He was the big dude. Every pro bought from him for years here in Boston. We were sad to see them shut down.
Hey,
Well,
Lou,
Go ahead.
do you remember Blindstrom's?
No.
How about Jack and Marion's?
No. When was
Really?
that? What time was that? What time era?
Michael,
was
you're too old for us.
But in the early 60s.
Oh, no. I don't go back that far.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You make
Miller's older than he looks. He saw the original Hamilton after the signing with the fucking Constitution.
Wheeler's talking about the 1860s.
Lou,
Hi, Jeff.
I do have another comment. I just, looking at your website, two other areas, bodies of work. I look at, it's interesting to see people's bodies of work, because
Yes.
it's how they spent their life over time. And the fact that you got multiple bodies of work ongoing at the same time is impressive, because that's hard to do. I mean, to keep projects going and add to it over time. But the two that just, it's like completely different photographer is like Distressed Memories and Signs of Life. I looked at those and it's like, all right, who the fuck shot that? Because the distressed moments, I really love the imagery and the processing that you've done
Thank
to
you.
distress it. Because one of the things that I've gotten into, I've spent my entire fucking career having technically perfect photographs. And now what I'm doing is enjoying really fucking them up with
That's
texture
right.
and edges and stuff. So I really, although it's really hard to fuck them up well,
That's right.
which the distressed memories really are. And then the other thing is Signs of Life.
Yeah, Signs
Like,
of Life looks
really
like you spent a
nice
day at J.
Still life
Stell's.
stuff. What the fuck are you doing shooting good still life?
Well, I had a mentor early on. I didn't know I went directly from physics into photography, and I had a mentor, a Frenchman, who had a studio in downtown Boston. And I kept saying I wanted to take my Leicas. I didn't have any Leicas at the time. I couldn't afford them, but I said I wanted to take a couple of Leicas and go cure the ills of the world. And he said, wait a minute. He says, you're here in Boston. You think you're going to shoot outside. It's cold 10 months out of the year here. You better learn how to shoot in the studio. And he taught me lighting and how to shoot in the studio. And a lot of my clients were people I had to shoot still lifes for and got to be, so that's where the Signs of Life came from. Those are, a lot of them were done for clients. You know, you remember back in the day when we shot for paper manufacturers, you know, and they were allowed to do really,
paper and printers and color
Yes.
separators.
you could do really creative things and stuff like that. Anyway, and then the, so that's the Signs of Life, but the Distressed is all black and white. Oh, you got it up. Okay.
Yeah, there's the
All
Signs
black
of
and
Life.
white.
That's why I'm saying it looks like the inside of Jay Mazel's whole place.
I didn't think about that. And I have most of that stuff packed away in all. This Priscilla here hates me because I have all this stuff hidden away in places that get in her way. But the
I
Distressed
think we all do.
black and white, and it is totally an homage to where many of us began in photography, black and white, and how important, that's what the memories part is, how important photographs are from historical way back, et cetera, but it's all from my imagination. It's actually, to be more specific, the whole project is called hypnagogic. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that. I had never heard the word. Somebody came and told me that word years ago when I was doing started the project. It means that a time when you're almost asleep. I'm sure you all have had it where you're in this dream state, you're almost asleep, you kind of know you're awake, you kind of know you're almost asleep, etc. And you get these images in your head that often are totally fantastical. There's not any reality to them. You're flying, you're whatever. And then if you remember them, sometimes I can write them down, draw them out. I actually draw them out. I'm having an exhibit of that work in September. Huge exhibit of that work, 20 years of that work. And the curator wants the little drawings that I've made over the years. Actually, Priscilla has a stack of those too, that we just went around and found a lot of them. But it's all hypnagogic. It's all total, no reality involved, but making it look like it's real because it's a photograph, which don't lie. So you get these pictures.
Right.
So anyway, I will send it. If you stay in touch with me, I will send you when that show is up too. But thank you, Jeff, for bringing that up because it's a body of work that has not been shown often. I think it's a little beyond most people. So thank you for mentioning it.
You know,
Cool.
I'm sitting here listening to you and your images and your style of speaking, and I'm going, and I mean this with all due respect, all right? Your mind is so creative and so
No.
So-
Thank
Michael's
you.
trying to tell you.
no, so sharp.
Thank you.
Why did you wind up a friggin' photographer? What
I was
the
a rocket
fuck?
scientist at one point. Remember, I told you I had physics. I worked for NASA. So I was a rocket scientist. But I don't play well in the sandbox with others.
Oh, maybe that's why I love you.
I'm not a rocket scientist, but I did take up space at school.
You know, you're my kind of guy. I gotta tell you.
Thank you.
Like
Send
Michael's
me your
just getting
email.
jealous
Send me
here.
your email. Please, please, please send me your email. Okay.
I will. I absolutely.
Michael, I think
stay in
he's
Absolutely.
jealous that he didn't get you into the Explorers of Light.
Oh, no, I'm a Nikon guy. I'm sorry.
I know.
I started the Explorers of Light,
Oh, did you?
and I also was a Nikon school instructor.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
Well,
Stephen Gotts has his hand up.
yes.
I do. Lou, I just want to say one thing. The presentation was wonderful, but it's your excitement that I'm enjoying. You're really excited about your work. You love the shots that you got that you're so happy with. And you seem to be, so heavily involved in your current projects. After so many years of being a photographer, the excitement is what makes
It's getting better. Think about it. We bring all the experience that you know how much experience you brought to the profession. That stuff piles up, and now you're able to find venues in which people are interested. So the excitement is thrust upon me, if you think about it. Because
I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
thank you. Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you, guys. John, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Well, Lou,
Yeah.
you're not done yet. There's one more question.
Uh-oh.
So what's the deal with the Briscoe Center for American History and your archive at the University of Texas? How'd that work out?
You know about how that was a long time. Actually, the Death Row Project was what got me into that, because one of the prisoners who's been executed, I was supposed, anyway, I won't get into that. In Texas, he and I became friends. We talked every day on the phone. He was able to remember reversing the charges. He reversed the charge. My phone bill for those several years was astronomical. Every day. Anyway, he made criterion for me to come down to Texas and photograph him was that I had to give the photograph I generated to his alma mater, which was the University of Texas. And that's how, so I called them trying to honor his request. I called them and said, how do I donate this print, this 8x10 print of this guy who was about to be executed? The curator said, hey, that's really unusual. And I said, whoa, wait a minute, I got 20 more also. So that's how it's at. So we have been sending some stuff down to them periodically every 6 months or so.
Well, it's interesting. It is taking up 7 linear feet. I just, on the website there, legacy at utexas.edu, it basically talks all about what box the slides are in.
Oh,
2 views of Cuba exhibit catalog.
that's right.
I found that very interesting because I'm actually kind of working with RIT as a place for the repository of my archives at some point in the future. And
that's a very important issue. I've had meetings here amongst curators, lawyers, gallerists, et cetera, here in my studio conference room. We used to meet every couple of months to talk about legacy. Where are our photographs going when we can no longer, or even while we're still alive and doing well, but where are our pictures going to end up? And it is a bear of a problem.
Yeah.
So talk at some point, maybe even to John, about that issue, because it's just so insurmountable.
Yeah, we have a few people here that I think are interested in that topic. So we should definitely have that conversation.
We should. It's a very important. So many photographs are thrown out, destroyed. I talked to Jay Maisel about that very issue, and he hasn't solved the problem. He's got
Really?
millions of photographs, millions, and
Millions,
he
yeah.
has not solved the problem.
Well, an awful lot of stuff. I'm assuming you saw Jay myself, but Stephen Wilkes and Jay, a whole bunch of, I mean, just bags and bags of transparencies being tossed. Now, you know, with Jay, they weren't all the stuff that was tossed was not good stuff.
That's right. That's right.
But and I recently, when I sold my studio and moved into a new house, I had to go from an entire room dedicated to film to a single closet dedicated to film. And one of the things, you know, I used to shoot 8x10 film for Budweiser when I do beer pours, and it was nothing to shoot 125 sheets of 8x10 film in a day shooting beer pours. Well, I love doing that because I charge them $30 a sheet for film and processing. Are you kidding? I made as much money on F&P as I made on photo fees sometimes. But
Plus all the beer
and
you
I-
got to drink.
huh?
Plus all the beer you got to drink.
Oh, I hated Budweiser. Are you kidding? One of the
Put a link
worst
to the J
jobs I
movie.
ever did was for Needham, where I shot what the hell is it? Oh God, it's another Anheuser-Busch brand, and it was a light version. And
Miller?
no, Anheuser-Busch, but Needham
Anheuser-Busch,
had it. Oh, Jesus Christ. It's absolutely horrible fucking beer. But I was shooting the light version of the beer, and I ended up with a whole shitload of that beer. And the only thing we found, I tried to give it away to assistants and they didn't want it. I mean, when you can't give beer away, you know how bad it is. But the one thing that I found, which was particularly useful, Becky found that if she put that beer in little cans and put them in the garden, the only thing
Slugs.
that liked that beer was slugs.
That's right.
The slugs would go in, drink the beer, die, and that's how we got rid of slugs.
Wow.
The things
Sorry
we
for
learn.
the divergence.
And I just put a link to the movie Jay myself there for
Yes,
people who are not
yes,
familiar
good
with
idea.
that.
Wonderful movie.
But I do think that the legacy, you know, Nuller, I don't know what the fuck you're gonna do with your shit.
I have no problem. And
What's-
there's plenty of. and
Where's
there's
it gonna go when you move on?
on the back end of the closet door. Only 4 pictures. I mean, what can I? The
Well, on that note,
University of Hard Settlers going to take my.
What's the
my
matter
entire
you?
Archive. Yeah, right. Yeah, what's the matter you is right.
Mueller has a psychiatrist that's keeping his pencil drawings.
Yeah, but there's stick drawings.
well, Lou, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Before
Thank
we
you
go
for the
totally off
opportunity to
topic
meet all
here.
these people, wonderful people. And everybody, please send me your email addresses and we can stay in touch.
So I do have one more comment. What the
Okay.
fuck is with the AOL.com email address? Do you still actually use an AOL account?
She's laughing. She's laughing. Yes. And my assistants have been trying to get me off of it for years. Do you know, I've photographed in 60 countries. Do you know how many people around the world know my address? And I stay in touch. So I know it's longevity. Same thing as legacy.
Yeah, okay.
Very cool. Well, thank
And
you
right.
all.
Nuller, I got one thing to say to you, Nuller.
Go ahead.
Fuck you, Nuller.
I have been waiting for that for over 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's what's kept me going.
Good. We'll be back here on Thursday with Stephen Begleiter.
Okay.
Stephen assisted Mary Ellen Mark and who else was it? I'm drawing blanks. But anyway, he was an assistant in the 80s in New York, then went out on his own. And he was kind of responsible for me getting back to shooting when I took some classes from him. So I'm looking forward to seeing that one. So we'll see you on Thursday.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank
Send
you
me,
so
send
much,
me,
Lou.
send me.
Yes.
Thank you so much. that was great. That was really a lot of fun.